For a closer look at the humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza, let me turn to Paul O'Brien. He's the executive director at Amnesty International USA. Paul, we saw in Noor Harazin's piece, the scale of the devastation and the need is so enormous. How are these hospitals, these doctors, how are they even doing their jobs on a daily basis when they're running out of fuel, clean water? They don't have the proper supplies anymore.
That's right. And some of the paramedics that we've been talking to are trying to provide some of these services without enough equipment, while some of their colleagues have been killed in some of these attacks. 6,000 bombs in 6 days have landed in Gaza, including, as your reporting said, not just in the northern areas where people have been ordered to evacuate, but in the south as well. They're under impossible circumstances. The humanitarian crisis there is already a catastrophe, and it's only going to get worse.
So what do you make of this this pathway, humanitarian pathway that Egypt and Israel have agreed to open through the Rafah border crossing? Some 20 trucks packed with aid have been waiting there for days now, and it sounds like they're one step closer to being allowed to get into Gaza. It seems like 20 trucks is just not enough. Is that just a drop in the bucket?
Exactly. It's far too little too late. And remember, that crossing itself has been bombed, and there are constraints in the passage of trucks going in and out of that area. So we don't think this is going to be anything close to meeting the levels of need, which is growing by the day.
Well, talk about life for everyday Palestinians in Gaza. What is that like? What are you hearing from your people?
So we have researchers on the ground continuing their investigations in Gaza, and they are getting direct evidence of exactly what you were reporting earlier, that families are being put into impossible choices. Move out of your homes and your livelihoods, but there's no guarantee that you will have a right of return. Split your families if you want to live. For those who are disabled or the young or those who just want to stay in their homes, which is their right, they face the choice that they may actually be giving up their lives by refusing to give their homes, because the level of bombing that we have seen in what is, everybody knows, one of the most populated areas on earth is causing the levels of casualties that you documented already. More than 3,700 dead so far, and the number will only grow as the conflict escalates.
Let me read you what the UN's Agency for Palestinian Refugees had to say. They're saying Gaza's last seawater desalination plant has shut down, 6 water wells, 3 water pumping stations, and 1 water reservoir, which served more than 1 million people, is essentially cut off. So what are we talking about here when people don't have access to clean water? What does it mean in terms of waterborne diseases on top of everything else?
Yeah, let's first put it in context. The last time that I was in Gaza and I stepped outside that desalination area, I could barely breathe because of the level of fecal matter in the air and the level of sewage off the Gazan coastline. It was not in our view, human rights living conditions before this conflict started. Then you had a siege that prevents water, food, electricity from going into the region. The conditions there are so dire that people are dying. And this is a form of collective punishment that we consider a human rights violation in itself. The scale of loss, the failure of the global leaders to focus on what is happening now to Palestinians is exacerbating the problem.
And finally, Paul, I have to ask you about how important fuel is in this crisis. And the Israelis are saying, yes, we're going to allow food and water to get in, but it seems like they're going to go and not allow fuel to get in. But how essential is that for running generators?
Well, exactly. Once you have cut off the very few forms of mains electricity, then you're down to generators, and that's dependent on fuel for almost all those in Gaza. It's the same with food and water being at crisis levels of, you're seeing the long lines of people waiting to refill water. So the situation is dire, and what we need, particularly from leaders in the United States and in the European context, is to focus on the harms to the Palestinians that are occurring now, to lift up their plight and to ensure that if there is an escalation in the conflict, well, first, there shouldn't be, we're calling for a de-escalation, but that Israeli forces protect civilians in everything that they do.
All right, Paul O'Brien, you certainly shed a new light on this crisis going on in Gaza. Thank you.